another Apollo Papyrus episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, the interview guest is a mental health advocate who, while not having written a book by himself yet, was a contributing author to Scars to Stars Volume 3, Stories of Vulnerability, Resilience, and Overcoming Adversity. His name is Erik DaRosa, and here's my interview of Erik. Erik DaRosa, welcome to Apollo Papyrus.
Hey, Aaron. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited, and congratulations on the rebrand.
Thank you. Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Sure. So I'm Erik DaRosa. I live in Snowmass Village, Colorado, about 8,300 feet up in the beautiful Colorado Rockies. I moved here with my wife and two cats in 2011 after spending over 18 years in New York City as a finance executive. And these days, I am using my own lived experience and my own personal mental health journey as a mental health advocate, podcaster, author, public speaker, and looking at ways to be able to combine the sport of skiing, which I'm extremely passionate about, with helping others to heal their own personal mental health struggles.
What is it like to live with anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorder, and what is it like to suffer from debilitating disassociative episodes?
It's a great question, Aaron. And let me start with how you described it. It's something that I live with now. For so long, it was something that managed me. And for the first 33 years of my life, I never told anybody that I was struggling. I never told anybody what I was dealing with. And it was difficult enough dealing with severe anxiety, as you had said, obsessive compulsive disorder. And for me, that presented itself with lots of intrusive thoughts, which dominated most of my waking hours. And until I suffered my first dissociative episode in the late summer of 2004, I was living in fear and of being judged, of being different, of not really being sure what truly was wrong with me and if there was anything that could be done. And when I finally had that dissociative episode with the help of my wife and my amazing therapist that I was introduced to, I was able to begin what has been now almost a 20-year long healing journey. And as I said at the beginning of this, I now have the ability to live with anxiety and live with obsessive compulsive disorder and understand what those things are and how they impact me rather than having them manage my day to day.
Now, from what I understand, you've never written a book of your own, but you wrote a chapter in the collaborative book Scars to Stars Volume 3, Stories of Vulnerability, Resilience, and Overcoming Adversity. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And so I had written a bunch of articles and done a lot of work in writing around the podcast and sharing pieces and parts of my mental health journey. But it wasn't until June of 2023 when I was introduced to Dina Brown Mitchell, and she lives here in Colorado as well. We were introduced through a mutual friend through the podcasting space, and she was putting together the third volume of her Scars to Stars work and asked me if I would be interested in writing a piece of my own mental health journey, something that I had really been able to come to terms with and felt comfortable being able to sit down and write. And so for me, it was a tremendous honor and has begun what is, now kicked off a very creative spark for me, something which I had really suppressed, I guess, since my childhood years. And I'm excited to be sitting down and put pen to paper and put my fingertips on the computer, and a lot of things have now come out of being one of those 17 collaborative authors.
Now, without spoiling too much of the overall series that you've collaborated for, Scars to Stars, what is the series of books as a whole about?
Sure. So all three books are all about people who have overcome significant, adversity, difficulties in their lives, whether it's mental health struggles, whether it is addiction and recovery, whether it is domestic violence, suicide. You kind of name the big T series of little T traumas, and that's what all of the books in the series are all about. And it's each individual author sitting and telling a piece of their story, so that other people really start to feel that they're not alone in their own personal journeys, and that they can take some comfort in knowing that there's somebody else out there just like them who has gone through something very difficult, and by being vulnerable and opening up, they've been able to heal in a very positive way. And it serves as an inspiration in many ways for the reader to be able to pick that up and read any one of those chapters, and connect with that in some sort of a personal way.
You are a fellow podcaster as you co-host a mental health podcast called From Survivor to Thriver with Mark Fernandez. What content can listeners excuse me, what content can listeners expect from a typical episode of your podcast, and what is it like to work with Mark on a podcast?
Sure, that's two really great questions. So we started the From Survivor to Thriver podcast in January of 2021, and now we'll be 3 years old next week and have over 153 episodes out. The podcast was created with the overall mission of shattering the stigma around having mental health conversations and letting other people know, in a very similar way to the message in the book series, that they're not alone on their journeys, and that there's help and there's hope and there's a way through. And so if you tune into any one of our episodes, you'll hear a story. We like to call them stories of thrivers now. People who at one point in time, however they self-describe surviving and what that looked like, and then talking with us and our audience about what the arc was like to move from surviving to thriving. And by thriving, what we mean is not every day is rainbows and unicorns. It just means that there was a point in time in their journey when they realized that something needed to change, something needed to be done differently. And so they either asked for help, they spoke out to a friend, they, were able to take their life and change their trajectory and put themselves on a course of healing. And so we cover everything under the sun when it comes to mental health and the intersection of all things mental health related. Uh, Working with Mark has been amazing. We've been side by side on this project from day one. The inception of the podcast actually took place in Mark's kitchen in December of 2020 while COVID was still going on. And I was writing what I thought would be an article blog piece about a specific part of my own mental health journey. And during the course of explaining to Mark what I was doing, it turned into me saying, "Hey, I think we need to start a podcast." That's how everybody back in 2020 and 2021, as we know, in the throes of the pandemic, they were getting their information, and everyone was tuning into podcasts and using it as a way to feel a little bit less isolated and to grow their knowledge base. And we've been together on this journey now for, as I said, 3 years, and it's been wonderful. And Mark and I both have been on our own decades-long mental health journeys and come to the podcast from two very different perspectives, and two very different mental health diagnoses. And from the beginning, it's been aimed at having what we call kitchen table conversations with our guests, where they have the opportunity to come on. And our audience members, it's as though they've stumbled upon a conversation that's taking place in one of our homes at the kitchen table. And it's just a real, raw, relatable conversation with a real person who's sharing the ins and outs of their survivor journey.
And I'm going to pivot back to writing. Do you plan on, or are you considering writing a book of your own in the future?
Actually, yes. And so one of the things that came out of writing this chapter was it really rekindled my love for writing. I was a very avid reader from a very, very young age. And one of my favorite authors growing up in Massachusetts and New England was Stephen King. And I remember picking up my first Stephen King novel probably in seventh or eighth grade, and it just kicked off this lifelong passion for reading. And at the same time, there was a very creative side to me, and I really enjoyed writing, and the math and sciences side of things was not really my strong suit. Oddly enough, I ended up moving to New York City after graduating college, and worked on Wall Street, and had some other finance related roles over that 18 years. And so I really suppressed my creative side, and I've seen it become reborn since moving here to Colorado. And yes, to answer your question, I started working on actually a fiction novel, and this was last October. I was on vacation with my wife, and it was really born out of the character itself was born out of kind of a bit of my own story, and taking readers through a combination of what it's like to suffer with mental illness, and along with my knowledge and inside knowledge of working on Wall Street and in the finance sector, and how it is still very much taboo to really be talking about mental health struggles. And so I started working on that when we got home at the end of October, and I'd say I'm probably about a third of the way through, and it's been really fun birthing a character into the world. And I know at some point in the future there'll be certainly more to come on the nonfiction side as well. I've been very open about my own personal story, and sharing that as well on the podcast. But there are some things that I feel I can get across better in writing, not only about my story, but things that I've done to help heal myself, which I know others can benefit from reading. So yeah, there's definitely more writing in the works for me for sure.
Why is it important to shatter the stigma around mental health?
So for a very, 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 very long time, having any type of mental health disorder, mental health illness, any type of, let's call it, a brain injury, brain disease, has been stigmatized and has been a taboo topic. So growing up in the 1970s and 1980s, it was certainly something that was never spoken about, wasn't even all that well understood by anyone other than professionals. And that was a time when people really didn't even speak openly about cancer. I remember rolling into the late 80s and early 90s during the AIDS epidemic in the US, and that was again another taboo topic, which today people speak about as though they're talking about diabetes or any other type of illness. And so for me, having lived in the shadows, as I say, for so very long, and not feeling comfortable speaking about that topic, it became really important for me to be able to help other people who might have struggled in the same way that I did, who may not yet be comfortable having their own voice, or may not have a community around them with who they can share that. I really wanted to start to be the voice for those people. And I wanted to be able to scream it loudly, as I say, from the mountaintops here in Colorado, that there's no shame, there's no judgment. We all have something, and we should all be able to feel comfortable sharing that something with someone. And so that for me is really the genesis of why, shattering that stigma and everything, all of the other stigmas that, as I say, kind of interplay with mental health. Those are all like top of my list, things that I would like to see, kind of eradicated, and people be able to feel comfortable and confident speaking openly and honestly about what they're dealing with.
What was your healing journey like? And when you talk about a fluid healing journey, what do you mean by that?
Sure. So my healing journey, I'm gonna say it started back in 2004. And so it's been, a good 19 years for me. It's been a journey of, let's call it, post-traumatic growth. I love that phrase. And I actually had a guest on my show a couple of nights ago who was actually talking about that. And it's really been, a journey of discovering who I am and recognizing and learning along the way that what I have experienced and what I live with, from a mental health disorder standpoint, is perfectly okay. And when it comes to mental health journeys, uh, I've always talked about them, from the perspective of being nonlinear. And then I started to hear that phrase being used quite often. And so I thought, well, I need to replace nonlinear with something that is a little bit closer to, what I do, whether it's on the snow, with frozen water, or spending time in the beach. Those are two very important places for me. And so the journey for me really resembles something more of, water or a stream or a river. And that's what I mean by fluid. It's ever changing. And what the interesting thing, just like with water, is when obstacles or rocks get in the way, water doesn't isn't stopped by that. Water finds a way to be able to move around it, move through it, move over it. And in so many ways, that's what we're dealing with when we have a mental health journey is, along the way, things might creep up. We might have obstacles and we might encounter some roadblocks. But it's all about using the tools that we've learned along the way to be able to navigate that and to be able to move through it and around it and over it and become a much stronger person as we get to the other side.
How important is community in the healing process, and how can one go about creating a healing team? And as I understand it, by a healing team, you're talking about more than just medical professionals.
Yes, absolutely. It's a great question, Aaron. So let me take the community piece first, and just I'll tell a short little anecdote. Last week here in Aspen Snowmass was Aspen Gay Ski Week, and it is one of the largest gay ski weeks around the world, and the largest that's hosted in North America. And as a former ski instructor, I volunteered this year as a ski guide to be able to go out on the snow and show the participants during the week lots of our terrain and of course some of my favorite places to ski. And one of the things I learned right away was the importance of community for the participants, and how having a community and having a like-minded community on the snow really allowed for everybody to come together and kind of share this common passion and this common love. And I've looked at my own personal journey and the times that I hid things from people, and I tried to solve all those problems by myself, and how it only got worse instead of better. And so when it comes to healing along your own mental health journey, community is incredibly important, and that community is what leads me to talk about the healing team. And so that healing team, as you said very accurately, is made up of far more than just professionals. That healing team is something that anybody can create, and it doesn't even have to be around a mental health issue. It could be around any struggle that you might have in your life. It's really creating that circle of people around you who that you can trust, and who you can go to in extremely difficult times. And for me, that healing team is made up, of course, of me. And I like to think of myself as the captain of my own healing team. It's my wife. It is my therapist. So I do have a professional there. It's my Reiki, an energy healer, and two or three of my extremely close friends. And one of the great things about that healing team is I know I can go to any one of those individuals at any particular point in time, and I can share with them what I may be struggling with. And they will come to the table, both literally and figuratively, with an open ear just to listen. I'm often not looking for them to problem solve or come up with answers for me. I'm usually just looking for somebody that I can talk to, that I can share what's happening with. And so it's been super, super powerful for me. And what it's done is it's really led me to find a much deeper and broader community within the mental health world as well. It's been amazing to me to see how many people just in the past 3 to 5 years have really started to become open and talk about what they're struggling with. And I always liken it to kind of building a village. Hillary Clinton's book about, it takes a village. And I think in many times, you start with maybe a village and a cul-de-sac, and then it grows into a town, and then that town suddenly becomes a bigger city. And it's just person by person by person that the community grows. And the bigger that community is, the stronger everybody is at the end of the day.
Erik, thank you for appearing on Apollo Papyrus. You were an amazing guest.
Aaron, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to hearing the episode when it's released.
It was wonderful to interview Erik, as he is an insightful mental health advocate, and I wish him well if he decides to write a book of his own. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to write and read your passion. Bye for now. Remember to subscribe to the Apollo Papyrus YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/@Apollo Papyrus and the Apollo Papyrus Substack newsletter at apollopapyrus.substack.com. Y'all can visit the Apollo Papyrus website at campaaronapollo.witsite.com/Apollo Papyrus and follow Apollo Papyrus on Threads, Instagram, Facebook, and Tumblr at Apollo Papyrus. Copyright 2024, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.